Hi boys and girls, this is Module 6, Lesson 4, Problem Set. We're only going to do this first problem together, and then you will be doing your exit ticket, which will be very similar to this. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 1 says, the chart below shows the number of magazines sold by each student. So here's the student going across the top. We have Ben, Rachel, Jeff, Stanley, Debbie. And then the number of magazines that they sold, which is in the hundreds, okay? Letter A says use the chart to draw a bar graph below. Create an appropriate scale for the graph. Now this would be a lot easier if they had the square units in here, but we'll do the best that we can. So they have some parts labeled. They have the title of the bar graph, number of magazines sold by third grade students. You always need a title. It's kind of like a book. You always need a title. Over here is magazines sold. So this is going to be our scale telling us how many magazines were sold. And across the bottom is going to be the student names. Okay, so our first task here is to make the bar graph. And the first thing we need to do is decide on what our scale is going to be. When I look at the numbers here, they're all in the hundreds. So I think I'm going to start with my first line being 100 magazines. And I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. So I'm going to go up by 100 increments. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. That was sloppy. 600. So if these are 100 increments, we're going up by 100s, what would be the halfway mark between each of these? We would have 150, 250, 350, and so on and so forth. Across the bottom is going to be the student name. So we're going to start with Ben. He's our first guy on the chart. And Ben sold 300 magazines. So I'm going to draw a little line right here to show the top of my bar for Ben because it's at 300. And I'm going to draw straight lines down the best that I can. And then I'm going to shade it in. You can use color if you want to, or you can just leave your bars blank. That's okay too. Let's go to our next one, which is Rachel. And again, you have to write small and neatly for these. We have Rachel who sold 250. So I'm going to come up here. Here's 200. About halfway in between 2 and 300 is 250. So I'm going to draw my graph there. And I'm going to do this one like this, just shade it in like that. Next is Jeff. I'm going to squeeze Jeff right here on top of the word student. Jeff sold 100, so I'm going to kind of eyeball right where 100 is and come across and draw my line there and then draw the bars coming down. And there's Jeff's line, his bar. Next is Stanley. Stanley sold 450, so I'm going to come up here, kind of eyeball where 450 would be, and come across. Let's see if I can do that. And of course, it's not going to be perfect, but we can get pretty close. Shade that in. Again, you can use different colors if you want to. Make it pretty, make it the colors of the rainbow. Last is Debbie. And Debbie sold 600 magazines. So I'm going to go up here and eyeball it, come on over and draw my lines the best that I can. You can use a ruler if you want to make it super duper neat. So we're not going to write out letter B. We already explained it. Because all of the numbers were in hundreds and I had 7 lines there that I could use, 6 lines, sorry. And I should really label 0 because 0 is down here. So let's go to letter C. How many fewer magazines did Debbie sell than Ben and Stanley combined? So Debbie sold 600. That's a lot of magazines, but they're asking about Ben and Stanley. So Ben sold 300. And I like to keep all of my work organized. So Ben sold 300 and Stanley sold 450. So we have to figure out how much they sold together first before we can find out how many fewer magazines Debbie sold. And they sold 750. Because it says fewer, that's a clue to me that we're going to subtract the two totals. So 750 minus 600 equals, I'll give you a moment to figure that out, 150 fewer magazines. Let's take a look at letter D. How many more? Again, how many more are clue words that we are going to subtract? How many more magazines did Debbie and Jeff sell than Ben and Rachel? So I'm comparing those two totals, the total of Debbie and Jeff and the total of Ben and Rachel. And we want to know how many more. So Debbie and Jeff, Debbie sold 600. Jeff sold 100. So together they sold 700. Ben sold 300. Rachel sold 250. So together they sold 550. So now we're going to take 700 minus 550 because we want to know how many more Debbie and Jeff sold. And the answer is 150 more magazines. That's our label. More magazines because that's what the question asked. Boys and girls, you're going to go on to do the exit ticket, which is very, very similar to this, finding some totals of things before you can do your subtraction. So please read questions carefully and pay attention.